What if I told you Shakespeare wrote a poem that does not get the proper credit for the depth that it has? Well, you'd say no, duh. Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we're here for another poetry discussion, which will appear, of course, in the poetry discussion playlist here on the channel, but it will also appear in the William Shakespeare playlist on the channel, and finally, 30 must-read poems here on the channel. Each of the 30 must-read poems videos includes 3 separate sections. Number 1, a brief bio over the poet at hand. Number 2, a brief summary of the types of poems that writer writes. And number 3, an analysis of the poem itself. So, who was William Shakespeare? William Giuseppe Shakespeare was born April 23, 1564, in Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire, England. I have to admit, the English certainly do name their places much more elegantly than we do here in the United States. For example, Shakespeare is from Stratford-upon-Avon, Warwickshire, and I am from Kansas City, Missouri. Though I'll definitely take American food over theirs. Also, yes, I did make up a middle name because Shakespeare did not have one. Sue me. For reference, 1564 was the same year Galileo Galilei was born. It was the first time anyone documented a sighting of a rat king, and it was the year the Italian artist and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Michelangelo died. William's father, John, was a glover. No, not that Glover, a glove-making glover. He was also well-regarded enough to serve as an alderman, a type of city councilman. Though, for reasons unknown to us, all that changed in the late 1570s. John lost his position as an alderman, and some illegal wool purchases cost his business as well, spiraling the family into harder conditions. Unfortunate indeed, but who is to say how much of the young playwright's sense of justice and tragedy were rooted here? And, perhaps, his propensity for writing royalty came from his mother, Mary Arden, themselves gentry, whose lineage is traceable all the way back to the Norman invasion of 1066. November 27, 1582, at 18 years old, William Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway. No, not that Anne Hathaway, though I kinda like it. Historians often say things like, there may have been haste in this arrangement, haste in this marriage, because the marriage banns were only read once as opposed to the customary 3 times. How strange. There may have been haste to this marriage. Anne Hathaway gave birth to their first child, Susanna, 6 months later. I'll let you do the math on that. February of 1585, the Shakespeares had twins, Hamnet and Judith. Then Shakespeare, like Jesus, disappears from history for a few years, until he pops up in London in 1592, where he began playing Quidditch for Ravenclaw. Obviously, that's a joke. He was producing his plays on the big stage of London, and his education, or lack thereof, was getting him sneered at by the fancy quote-unquote university wits, as they have come to be known, like Christopher Marlowe, with Marlowe's fellow college boy, Robert Greene, not that one, saying, quote, there is an upstart crow, beautified with our feathers, that with his tiger's heart wrapped in a player's hide, supposes he is as well able to bombast out a blank verse as the best of you, and being an absolute Johannes factotum, is in his own conceit the only shake scene in a country. With this quote, Greene had mocked Shakespeare on several levels, and even mocks a line from Shakespeare's Henry VI, where the tiger's heart is wrapped around a woman's hide. But by the time of that quote, Shakespeare's name was made, even if his reputation was not yet made as the greatest author of all time. A few years later, his son Hamnet would die of unknown causes, and it seems something snapped in William Shakespeare, as his most acclaimed works, including the ominously titled Hamlet, Macbeth, King Lear, Much Ado About Nothing, Measure for Measure, Midsummer Night's Dream, The Merchant of Venice, Othello, maybe Romeo and Juliet, as well as the form and genre-destroying portfolio of 154 sonnets, all followed that date. Despite the fact that William Shakespeare was already 32 years old when his son passed. All told, his works are believed to total between 37 and 39 plays, depending on where you're getting your facts, the aforementioned 154 sonnets, 2 long narrative poems, and myriad less famous poems. Not to mention, he's believed to have invented or introduced 1,700-ish new words, including such bangers as bedroom, majestic, lonely, undress, critic, addiction, and Jessica. And how many words did Robert Greene coin? With his fancy pedigree from academe. Ooh, academe, that's another one. That one probably belongs to Shakespeare as well as the fact that Shakespeare was part owner in the Globe Theatre. In 1613, Shakespeare seems to have retired, though he may not have conceptualized it as such. Not long thereafter, he had a night out with the boys, those boys being Michael Drayton, a poet, and Ben Jonson, a poet and playwright in his own right. It is conjectured that that night went well, possibly too well, because Shakespeare caught a fever and died the next day, April 23rd, the day he's believed to have been born. But, 52 years later. In his will, he famously left his wife, Anne Hathaway, his second best bed. One must wonder if this is Shakespeare's notorious wit and cunning deployment of innuendo at work. The epitaph on his grave reads, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." So what kind of poems did Shakespeare write? Well, 154 of them were sonnets. What is a sonnet? The sonnet is a popular classical form that has compelled poets for centuries. Traditionally, the sonnet is a 14-line poem written in iambic pentameter, employing one of several rhyme schemes and adhering to a tightly structured thematic organization. The name is taken from the Italian sonetto, or sonetto, which means a little sound or song. But Shakespeare didn't write just any kind of sonnet. He wrote what is now known as a Shakespearean sonnet. Well, what's a Shakespearean sonnet? A variation on the Italian sonnet tradition. The form evolved in England during and around the time of the Elizabethan era. These sonnets are sometimes referred to as Elizabethan sonnets or English sonnets. Although Shakespeare's sonnets have prominently endured for centuries, He was hardly alone in his embrace of this poetic style. Many prominent English poets of the day, from John Donne to John Milton, also wrote sonnets. Shakespearean sonnets feature the following elements. They are 14 lines long. The 14 lines are divided into 4 subgroups. The first 3 subgroups have 4 lines each, which makes them quatrains, with the second and fourth lines of each group containing rhyming words. The sonnet then concludes with a 2-line subgroup, and these 2 lines rhyme with each other. A B, C D, E F, G. That is the rhyme scheme. They are typically 10 syllables per line, which are phrased in iambic pentameter. Like as the waves make toward the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end. Each changing place with that which goes before, in sequent toil, all forwards do contend. Nativity, once in the main of light, crawls to maturity, wherewith, being crowned, crooked eclipses 'gainst his glory fight, and time that gave doth now his gift confound. Time doth transfix the flourish set on youth, and delves the parallels in beauty's brow, feeds on the rarities of nature's truths, and nothing stands but for his scythe to mow. And yet to times in hope my verse shall stand, praising thy worth despite his cruel hand. This being the 4th time a sonnet has appeared in this 30 Must Read Poems playlist, it might not be a surprise at this point that normally when this sonnet is talked about, it's in a fairly straightforward fashion. Now, very in depth in its attempt, right? The poem itself, and I don't mean attempt as dismissive, I mean as the attempt itself, very in depth. But oftentimes, what is talked about with this poem happens in the first quatrain and down in the final couplet. So, when this poem is talked about, what is often presented is pretty much just like as the waves make towards the pebbled shore, so do our minutes hasten to their end. Basically, the waves come in and they go. They're constant. This is just like sands through the hourglass. We are watching our time expire, each changing place with that which goes before. In sequent toil, all forwards do contend. Basically, just saying the whole first quatrain there, we're dying. We're dying. And yet to times in hope my verse shall stand, praising thy worth despite his cruel hand. Time is killing us, but despite that, art will make you immortal. I can create art that will immortalize you against the obviously perishing form in which you currently find yourself. Now, I think there's a little bit more here to talk about, but I do agree that for the most part, the opening quatrain and the final couplet are where all of the hoopla for this poem are to be made. I made the comparison earlier that the opening stanza, or quatrain, pardon me, talks about the sands of time. It talks about the waves, right? But it's kind of like the sands of time because they are changing, but they're motion. They are motion that sort of correlates with this idea that we are dying. But I don't think it's quite so simple as that. Are those waves constantly going in and out in a way that would maybe, if you thought about it pretty deeply, make you feel like you were watching an hourglass? Sure, but they're not relentless like the sands of time, in my opinion. They are relentless like a predator. They move, they bob, they weave, they come, they go, but they are always there. Unlike the sands of time, an hourglass, the waves are very dynamic. They are very foreboding. And if we take this one step further, the waves, they're the great without. The waves are but a portion of the mysterious ocean. You can make similar arguments for the sands of time because the much in the same way in a lot of like American literature, the forest is the subconscious. A lot of ancient literature, well, I guess that's European literature too, but a lot of ancient literature, you can stand in a desert for the forest and it becomes the same thing. It becomes the trial of the subconscious. It becomes the battle of man versus self, right? But these waves coming at you like predators, constantly moving, they are but a small portion of the big mystery. Now, the big mystery, if we're talking about death, the big mystery isn't whether or not we will die, it's what happens after. So, this idea of death coming, inevitably, death is coming. The only reason to raise the specter of the ocean is if we are making commentary on, in my opinion, on whether or not there is assurance of and in the afterlife. The waves represent the idea that it is a mystery. And if we jump down to that final couplet, so we have the idea of death is coming and it is a mystery. Not, oh, well, you're going to be with Jesus, right? Not this very Christian idea of the afterlife. The afterlife here is presented as mystery. And this final couplet says, "And yet to times in hope my verse shall stand, praising thy worth despite his cruel hand." My verse is your chance at an afterlife. Notably, this poem does not say this verse is your chance at an afterlife. It says my verse, meaning that it's through other poems, perhaps. It doesn't have to be this poem that ensures someone will live forever. In fact, there's very little here to make anyone believe this poem is going to help anyone live forever. What mythos are we building in this poem? So it's very, very almost sacrilegious poem when you break it down and look at it this way. The afterlife is a great mystery, but it's coming for you. And the only chance that you have of life after this is me telling your story. My verse. Now, what is poetry? Poetry is a story, right? The only chance you have to live forever is if I perpetuate your story. And really, if we're taking that look at things, it is awfully confusing to try to figure out just who is our speaker here. Why would our speaker have that power? Is this just some lowly poet? Is this just someone writing poesy? I don't think so. Is this sonnet meant to come from the hand of God? Is it meant to come from the hand of someone who has life in the balance? The poem overall sounds very much like what the common talking points are. Art is your chance at immortality. But there's a whole lot more mystery underneath these lines than that. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week, and I hope to have you back for the next one.